On today's Locked On Jayhawks, is this a must-win for KU in their second Big 12 game? We preview Jayhawks at Golden Knights of UCF.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I'm Darius Johnson. You can find me on Twitter at DJohnsonRadio. I can probably already feel the heat from the UCF fans. They get mad when you call them Central Florida. I'm pretty sure I wasn't supposed to call them Golden Knights. I think they're just Knights. I don't know. Either way, it's a big game. UCF is a good team. Kansas is struggling. Let's see if the Jayhawks can get one done on the road where they've struggled. We're going to be breaking that down on today's episode. Thank you for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find us on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And we're going to be getting into the top headlines, UCF scouting report, matchups of the game, players to watch on this episode of the show, which is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com and you can get started today. All right, let's get started here with our KU-UCF conversation with our headlines. I mean, is this a must-win for Kansas? It depends on your frame, right? If you're talking, the beauty of college basketball is you can lose games and then you go on a run in the NCAA tournament, right? No, your season does not come to a close if you lose this game. But if we are talking about the almost perception of this team, which maybe that's not the best way to put it, where this team is going, right? Like, you don't get to the destination unless you start to figure things out right now, is basically what I'm saying. Like, yes, there's always that hypothetical world where, you got a 10 seed in the tournament, like NC State, right? Makes it to the Final Four, right? That stuff happens, sure. But those are always exceptions to the rule. And if you don't want to do that, for Kansas to start turning things around, for Kansas to start feeling like they're heading in that proper direction, like they are the team that you want them to be, that kind of involves them starting to win some games. And I think, again, not to get too doom and gloom, but like, if you lose this game, you'd be 0-2 in Big 12 play. You have Arizona State upcoming on a Wednesday, which that should be a winnable game. But again, if you're going to be 0-2 coming into it, then I guess what becomes winnable at that point? Still, nonetheless, you start to maybe question that a little bit more. And then, you look at it and you're playing at Cincinnati, at Iowa State. Those are two top 25 teams after that, right? So, like, if you lose this game, where I'm going with this, there's a chance you start 1-4 in Big 12 play. Now, maybe you find a way to split on the road in that scenario and you're still 2-3. Well, let's say you would get to 1-4, because again, they've only been 3-10 in true road games in the Hunter Dickinson era so far. If you were 1-4, what do you think the record is that Kansas needs to get to the NCAA tournament? I know this sounds like a ridiculous conversation to have because we've just accepted that it's like a given that they're going to make it. But okay, Kansas went 9-2 in the non-con. So if they go 9-11 in Big 12 play, that would put them at 18-13. That doesn't sound like a great record, does it? That gets them into the NCAA tournament, I think, though, with how hard their schedule was in the non-con plus the Big 12 added up, and then you have the Big 12 tournament, which who knows what happens there. But if you go 8-12 and your record heading into the Big 12 tournament is 17-14, that's bubble time, right? And so if you're 1-4, then that would mean, A, you're not doing that well, and you would have to go, 8-7 the rest of the way to finish, which if you're 1-4, you're not going to guarantee that you're going to be a 500 team from then on, and you've already lost to some of your more winnable games. So, like, this is a very important game because then we don't have to have those discussions, right? Then we can just talk about, okay, that was a bad game against West Virginia. This is a team that has flaws, but at least they're still finding a way to win some games. You're trying to reclaim a win after you lost in Orlando last year. You're trying to reclaim some of the road struggles that you've had as a program. You're trying to figure out your lineups, your rotations. What is the best way to play? Who are our best players? Can we get these players playing right? All these things are important for this game, but you got to win. That you cannot have an 0-2 hole when this was supposed to be by Big 12 standards, like these are still good teams, but like an easier week than, again, having to go at Cincinnati and at Iowa State coming up here soon. Now, when you look at the UCF scouting report, they're 10-2 on the season. They're ranked right around 60th on KenPom. They beat a top 15 Texas A&M team by 3 in their season opener. Very impressive win there. They beat a top 100 Florida Atlantic team, and then they just won their Big 12 opener. This was very impressive. They went into Lubbock and beat Texas Tech, who's kind of a borderline top 25 team this year. So that was really impressive for them. Now, when you look at the losses, really good Wisconsin team that they lost to, but they lost by 16. That was a neutral court. And then they did lose in triple overtime, but it was to LSU, who's not very good. So I do think UCF is a good team. I think they're good enough to make the NCAA tournament. Will they gather enough wins because the Big 12 is so brutal? That kind of remains to be seen. But you look at the personnel of note for them. Darius Johnson is their 6'1" point guard. He averages 15.5 points per game. He's shooting a scorching 47% from 3 on pretty good volume and 4.4 assists, 2.9 steals per game. This dude is an absolute stud. Then you look at their other guard, and this is interesting. 6'3" scoring guard Jordan Ivy Curry. He's averaging 15.7 points per game, 1.5 steals, 41% from the field, 35 from 3, 87 at the foul line. If you would remember, Ivy Curry was somebody that KU was going after, at least there were some reports about it, in the portal and opted not to. I think he would be playing kind of the Diggy Coit role for KU, but he's been good enough for UCF where maybe you would expect him to even have a bigger role than that, and it'll be interesting to see what he does against KU. Then you have 6'4" guard Jalen Sellers. He's played the last 2 games. He missed the first portion of the season. I don't know if it was injury. I'm just kind of assuming it was. He hasn't played a huge role in the 2 games he's played so far, coming back this season after missing all those games, but you can't count him out from playing a big role in a game like this because he was a 32-game starter last year who averaged 16 points per game. So, they're getting better with adding him back into the lineup. They've got a couple wings that they play that are not necessarily super efficient offensive pieces or big scorers, but I guess they're lengthy glue guys who are probably good defenders. 6'6" wing Dallas Coleman, 6'8" wing JJ Taylor. The most interesting wing of the bunch is the guy who plays the 4. That would be 6'7" Keyshawn Hall. He is 235 pounds, so a little bit similar in terms of the height weight to what you have in KJ Adams. And this dude's a load. He's averaging 15.8 points per game, 6.6 rebounds, 2.3 assists. So really good production. He's shooting 43% from the floor, 33 from 3, 80 at the foul line. Now, this might actually be, as much as we just talked about in the West Virginia game, some of the struggles with, KJ Adams and how you want to play and stuff like that. This might actually be a good matchup for him to where, he has a good, he's been good defensively so far this season, and maybe he's able to shut down Keyshawn Hall and have a big game to help you come out on top. Who knows? They do have obviously similar size to the 4th, Keyshawn Hall, also similar size to the 5 because their main center is also 7'2", just like Hunter Dickinson is for KU. Now that would be in a freshman, Mustafa. I don't know if it's Thiam or Tim or how you pronounce the last name, but he's had a good freshman year, 8 points per game, over 5 rebounds per game, and 2.6 blocks per game. Very good shot blocker. He is foul prone, high number of fouls per game for him, so we'll see if Hunter Dickinson can try to take advantage of that. They do have 2 6'10" guys who they'll rotate in at either the 4 or the 5, so they do have a good amount of height and length and athleticism all over the court. What they do well, you look at UCF, and I mentioned some of the length. They are one of the taller teams in the country. They're basically top 80 in the country, whichever way you look at it, in experience, length, or average height, I guess you would put it as that way, and playing fast. So that's something they do. They're good at grabbing offensive rebounds. They are good at turning opponents over. They've been good at 2-point defense, which makes sense because they have all that length on their defensive end of the court. And they're also very good at getting to the free throw line, right? I mean, some of that length and athleticism allows them to drive and draw fouls. They've converted their free throws at a high rate, shooting free throws at a very strong percentage so far. And they're doing a good job so far this year at not fouling. I know I just mentioned their center averages a good amount of fouls, but overall as a team, they're not sending opponents to the free throw line a ton, which is a good mix to have for a team that has a lot of length. Now, if you remember in the game last year when KU played UCF plays a lot of zone, right? And that can help them avoid fouls too by playing in that way. What they've struggled with though for UCF, they're a decent 3-point shooting team. They're not a team that typically, is going to shoot 40%. Obviously, anybody could go off in a single game. But over for the season, they've been an above average 3-point shooting team. But they have struggled on 2-point shots. And what's odd is they rank really poorly in terms of paint points per game. Yet they're one of the highest nationally in second chance points. So they're getting offensive rebounds, but they're not finishing at the rim, which you feel like usually when you get an offensive rebound, you're putting it right back up at the rim, but that hasn't necessarily been the case for them. This has been a bad defensive rebounding team, too. They're 280th nationally in defensive rebound rate. So that'll be something we'll see if KU can take advantage because the offensive rebounding hasn't always been there for the Jayhawks. All right, let's get to our matchups of the game next. Players to watch. This is Locked on Jayhawks. And our episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for what player is going to score a touchdown. How many points is this KU player going to have? Parlay that with how many rebounds are they going to have? How many points each team's going to score? Alternate spreads. You think somebody's going to get blown out or you want to do a teaser parlay, just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Continuing on, thanks for making Locked On Jayhawks your first listen. Don't forget you can check out Locked On College Football, Locked On College Basketball for your second listen as well, anywhere that you do get your podcast. All right, matchups of the game for Kansas UCF. This is a Sunday game, by the way. Number one, can you just play with some energy to start off a game? No X's and O's here, no breaking down of stats, nothing that I have on the page to talk about, oh, they shoot this percentage and they're this percentile. Nah. Can you play with some energy to start off a game? We didn't see them play with a ton of energy in the West Virginia game. We didn't see them play with a ton of energy in the Creighton game. We didn't see them play with a ton of energy in the Missouri game, despite the fact that was your rival and you were just coming off a loss. Can you play with some energy? They played with some energy in these second halves. They played with energy in the second half against Missouri, played with energy in the second half against West Virginia, and they fell short both times because the hole they provided themselves was too big. Can you play with strong energy to come out in this game and play with your hair on fire? Play like you are the team that is desperate, because you should be playing desperate right now. And we haven't always seen that with this crop of players for Bill Self. Can you do that in this game? Number two, finding easy baskets. This hasn't been happening enough lately for KU, and I think a big reason why is just the lack of spacing. Other teams are plugging up the paint. They're bringing KJ Adams, defender, into the paint. There's Hunter Dickinson's guys in there too, right? So you have two defenders automatically, and then they might even be cheating a little bit off, Dajuan Harris or one of these other players that KU's playing if they don't respect their three-point shooting enough. And so there's not going to be as many easy baskets, because typically easy baskets are the ones that are layups, or the ones that Bill Self is so good at drawing up for getting his big man angles that he can get an easy lay-in out of it, right? And on paper, UCF ranks in the bottom quarter of college hoops in paint points and percentage of opponent paint points, or points coming from the paint. So in defensive paint points, I should say. So opponents' paint points and the percentage of that coming in. I worded that very weirdly, but basically teams are scoring a lot of points in the paint on UCF so far this season. UCF also ranks in the bottom 10th percentile. So they're in the bottom 10% of all college basketball for allowing second chance points. And they're in the bottom half for college basketball in transition points allowed. When you look at easy buckets, right? It is those layups that I mentioned. It's his dunks. It's also off, okay, it could be second chance point that you get an easy layup off of. It could be in transition where you get behind the defense, and that's one way to beat their zone. Just don't let them form the zone. Beat them in transition, get down the court, get an easy layup, get an easy dunk, get an easy open three, whatever it is, right? Those are all good news for KU. The UCF has struggled there, that maybe Kansas can get some more easy shots, easy baskets in this game. But what if that on paper doesn't apply? What if they do sag back? What if they sink their defense, right? What if they play this zone that they play, but they do it in an even, more condensed into the paint way that's really going to prevent you from scoring on the inside? I think that's going to be really interesting. Then does it matter that UCF has maybe struggled in some of those previous games, that this game, it's not going to matter? So we'll see, because on paper, Kansas should be able to get some easy buckets in this one, especially in transition, since Kansas does really score in transition well this season, and UCF's defense hasn't been great in transition defense, but it's certainly no guarantee right now with the way things are going for KU. Number three, working the zone and above the break threes. So that zone for UCF, you see most teams run like a 2-3, or we've seen Scott Drew for so many years, like, I know they haven't done it as much lately, but run like a 1-3-1. I think they're doing it a little bit more this year. Nonetheless, If memory serves me right, UCF was running like a 3-2 last year, which is a little bit different. But nonetheless, whatever the zone they're running, they killed KU with it. KU actually had a good start in the game, and then they just shut down. They couldn't figure out the zone. The offense was lethargic. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't really get Hunter Dickinson involved a ton in the game. And for UCF, that defense, that zone, it basically is eliminating corner threes. There have only been 31 corner threes attempted against UCF all season long in their 12 games. So that's less than 3 per game. That's basically like 2.5 3-point attempts from the corner per game. That is one of the 5 lowest rates in the country. So teams are not getting off threes against them about as much as any other team in the country, which means you have to be patient. You have to get inside. You have to find creases into the zone. You have to work for good shots. You can't just settle, and you have to prepare for those threes to not be of the corner variety because they're not allowing you to take corner threes. You have to take the above the break ones, which we'll get to maybe which players make sense to take advantage of that coming up in our next segment, players to watch and our player matchup to watch. We'll get to that on the other side. This is Locked on Jayhawks. Our episode of LOJ is brought to you by Rocket Money, which is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending and it helps you lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. One of the best features is the subscription tracker. You can use it to cancel services. You can use it to cancel something you might have forgotten that you're even still subscribed to, or you might not have realized the price has gone up. Plus, with their goals feature, you can automatically set aside money for your future. So no more stressing about your budget every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That is rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. Finishing up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks with our players to watch and our player matchup for the Kansas UCF matchup. Let's start with our player matchup here. I'm going to do it. I might get some, I don't know, upset people about this. KJ Adams versus Keyshawn Hall. All the discourse has been about KJ Adams seemingly for KU basketball here of late. And my thing this whole way through has been, I don't think the KJ Hunter pairing is a great pairing to have. I would like to see more Flory and Hunter lineups in this one. I would like to see more lineups where, maybe Storrs in at the 4 necessarily, and maybe if KJ was playing 18 to 22 minutes per game, like maybe that would be better in some senses. At the same point in time, I also lie in the I think there have been some people who just want to blame this one thing when I think it's more than that one thing, right? Like, is it part of what's gone wrong for KU? Yes. Is it everything that's gone wrong for KU? No, it's absolutely not. And I do think KJ still has had some good moments this year. And I think overall he's been a good defender this year. And so you look at Keyshawn Hall, the leading point getter for UCF. I think this is a game where you look at bodies being similar for Adams and Hall. I think this is one where you hope he can kind of take him out of the game and make it more difficult for them, right? And if they are in a zone, that maybe changes things up a little bit here for the matchup for what KJ can do. Because the way I view KJ Adams is he is a good passer. Can you get KJ into the high post against the zone and allow him to pick apart the defense with his passing? Now, the question is, would UCF at some point just be like, okay, if KJ Adams is in the high post and he catches it, we're just going to let him shoot it. We don't care, right? So do you end up having to use Hunter Dickinson in the high post? I don't know. Does KJ Adams become a cutter? Like, how does that entirely work? But I think more than anything, can Kansas figure out a way to use him? Because we know Bill Self is going to play KJ Adams big minutes, right? If we're just assuming what he's wanting to do, is going to play him big minutes. And I do think he can be very helpful for KU on the defensive end. Can KU figure out a way for things to work on the offensive end with him out on the floor? High on the go-off meter, I'm going to go with Zeke Mayo here for Kansas. He's been killing it, obviously. He's had more than 20 points each of the last 3 games. He had that big 27-point outing against West Virginia. He's been awesome to watch. I mentioned in one of the matchups that UCF does not give up corner threes. So if you're shooting threes, they're going to probably come from above the break, which is basically where it's, not the corner, whatever. Zeke Mayo leads Kansas in above the break threes. He's taken 57 of them, which is by far the most. Second on KU is Diggy Coit, who has 33. So it's 24 more, which, quick side note, Diggy Coit's shooting 42% on above the break threes. So maybe Diggy Coit can hit a couple threes off the bench in this one. But nonetheless, Zeke Mayo has the most above the break three attempts on the team this year. He's shooting them at a 35% clip, which for high volume, 35% from three, like that is good stuff from Zeke Mayo. Kansas is going to need him to stay hot. Kansas is going to need him to keep his offensive contributions coming to really help open up the zone, because otherwise it's going to be a long day for KU. And I would hope this would be a game that you play Rylan Griffin a little bit more to help with, 3-point shooting and spacing against the zone as well, but we'll wait and see on that one as well. That'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page. We'll see you next time for a KU UCF recap. Stay safe out there over the weekend, and hope you're not driving too much in the snow, and hope everybody's all right and good to go. And hopefully all of our power is still there for during the snowstorm for the KU UCF game. Although, I guess depending on what happens, maybe you don't want the power. Anyway, see you next time with LOJ.